Hi everyone. I feel like this is the beginning of a start-up career I never, stand-up comedy career I never actually wanted. Thank you for indulging. So welcome everyone to Money Talks. We have Tom Benson first, followed by Henry Leong, Amy Mason, and Joel Pember kindly standing in for Anthony Nankervis. So just a small announcement. We do have our AGDA Design Awards open at the moment. We do have, I've got my notes at home, so I am reading off the board. We have late entries closing the 9th of August, and we also have student entries closing on the 2nd of August. So it's a good way to benchmark your designs against others in the industry. So, I think this is the third installment of Money Talks that we have had. The first one I attended was in 2005 at Corner Gallery at TAFE. And I was a student at the time, and it blew my freaking mind. The year before, we did have a version of Money Talks where it was purely a panel, but this year we've returned to the original format of having a presentation first, followed by a panel. So without further ramblings from myself, if you could all welcome Tom Benson.
Cool. Hi, my name is Tom. I'm a design and brand specialist who's worked with a bunch of organisations and independently for the last 6 years. I didn't really know what to talk about for this event. I've actually never been to a Money Talks event, and I couldn't really be bothered watching the old YouTube videos online. I'm sorry. So yeah, there's so many different things that obviously go into a profitable project or any sort of making money in this industry. So I wasn't really sure what to pick to obviously talk about. So I figured I'd just talk about the first couple of years in the industry, a few of the mistakes maybe I made throughout that sort of progress, and sort of embrace those sort of failures and be really honest and transparent throughout that sort of process. I feel like a lot of people sort of come up, or some of the talks that I've been to, a lot of people come up here and sort of talk and show about all the good stuff, and they don't really highlight a few of the struggles and a few of the things you have to get to get to that point. And I figured, this being the students, maybe they'll shed a little bit of light and hopefully provide a little bit of clarity through that process. So to start things off, this is the percentage of growth from my independent business from the first 4 years of being in the industry. And so what I like to refer to is this point here, the 82.9 or the 83%, and that's what I refer to as the aha moment. And so everybody has this, throughout their sort of career or throughout their lifetime. It could be in your first year in the industry, it could be 5 years out, it could be later. It doesn't really matter when that happens, as long as it happens eventually, and everybody blooms and everybody has their opportunity at different times. But for me, that was halfway through my third year. I started to figure things out and realised how backwards I actually had it. I started to feel like, oh shit, like what have I got myself into? And actually, made a plan and started working towards that a little bit better. So year zero, leaving studies at Curtin. I graduated having absolutely no idea what I was going to do. I was so fucking naive, just had no plan. And for my final 6 months of study, all I really focused on was trying to develop my portfolio and get my CV and resume, really slick and looking, as creative as possible. But what I realised is that I had no sort of practical or business experience. I didn't complete any internships while I was studying. I didn't network with anyone or speak to any local agencies. And I didn't know how to explain my ideas properly or explain to businesses how I could actually help them. So after just applying for 20 plus different sort of roles, constantly looking on Seek and other sort of places, eventually landed a job, like a day a week at a family-owned studio as a video company that were looking to expand into design. And then from that, I managed to get a second job at City of Fremantle, just doing some casual sort of design work here and there. So the opportunities, sorry, just lost my point. So obviously I wasn't happy. I didn't really find a full-time job. I didn't really land, well, things didn't go to plan all the way that I sort of expected. But between those two jobs, I had a few extra days up my sleeve, and I managed to help out a few friends, discounted rates. A friend started a bus company, a friend doing sort of PT and fitness stuff. Earlier, when I was looking for jobs and just doing this manic sort of application process, I contacted Channel 9, and I didn't get the job through that process, and the person who did actually quit a week after. They contacted me, said, hey, do you want to get this job? And something didn't really sit right in my stomach, things didn't really feel quite right. I didn't really know it then, but looking back at it now, what I realised was that they wouldn't have appreciated the process that I would have taken, or the way that I sort of approached things with design. So I politely declined, and then later in that year, they got in contact again and said, hey, we've got this freelance project, can you come give us a hand? And said, of course, I'm going to dive right into it, let's do it. So I go and meet with them. I sit there, politely, don't say anything. They just talk the whole time, outline the sort of project. I don't ask any questions. They asked, they wanted designs for like a video wall. I didn't even know what a video wall was. I just kept quiet and was like, yes, didn't want to blow this opportunity. And of course, the project went to absolute shit. It was a complete disaster. And so they canned it, and at the end of it, they were like, just send us the time, send the invoice, it's done. And I remember walking away from that experience, just being quite distraught and quite like down about that sort of process. And I was actually really angry about the educational process. I felt like I got sort of spat out of university. I wasn't really, didn't really know anything. I had this huge disconnect from the reality of what the world was. I didn't really have a plan or process or way of approaching any projects. So I felt really, like down about those last 4 years of my life. Maybe that's a complete waste. But then I started reflecting a little bit more, and I was like, oh, maybe I was just a really shit student. Every second week I curtain I was probably stoned out of my head. I wasn't going to classes that often. I wasn't really committing or actually, thinking about my future in that sort of moment in time. And so I started to realise, maybe, this is my mistake, and I'm going to have to live with that, and I'm going to have to figure out a way forward. So I started actually researching YouTube videos, and one of them that I found online was how to deal with bad experiences. Bottling it up, using that to motivate yourself for something in the future. So, I did that. I reflected on that entire process I went through at Channel 9, where I fucked up, where I could do better, the things that I obviously needed to work on, and I actually actioned those to be better. So by the end of that year, I made $22,265, completely scraping the barrel. I was, all over the place, mentally, it was just in a dark place, questioning everything. I was doing a little bit of studio work for that video agency at $25 to $30 an hour. My client rate was $35 to $40 an hour. Had absolutely no idea what the charges, what people just told me at that time. And so I started to realise, obviously I need to work harder to get to a better spot. So year one, the next year out, I actually mentally committed to the idea of freelancing. I stopped seeing that as like a mistake or a failure, and really started like looking at that as an opportunity. I managed to find a few sort of small stints at a few different places. One of them was at a print shop. They did a lot of binding and production work, so I really honed my skills, covering some maternity leave then. I started to network with studios and agencies. So, I did an internship at a block in my first year, and then they got in contact a year later for some freelance work. And I started, becoming a little bit less introverted and trying to put myself out there and create a few more opportunities. But I didn't stop spending late nights at the computer because I knew I needed to get better. I knew I needed to keep honing those skills. And looking at the last year's, obviously income, I knew I had to just instinctively raise my rates. I wasn't earning enough. So I actually committed to branding myself a little bit better. I got myself a brand mark. I moved into a shared studio at this time as well. And so the people that I met in that co-working space really recommended and referred me to a few jobs, which is really, really good, got the ball rolling. But things just didn't magically appear. So, I tried to volunteer time. One of them was the Breast Cancer Care WA. Again, trying to network and learn on the run. trying to pick up those sort of things that would eventually pay off later in life. So again, at the end of the year, wasn't really where I was at. Again, I was in a very dark place. Clearly wasn't doing anything successful, really struggling to make money. I did raise my rates, $25 to $35 an hour, and then 40 to 50 at the client rate. Had a little bit of growth, but again, it was absolutely fuck all. And I realized, something needs to change. Through that, raising the rates, obviously I lost a few clients, and so I was charging a little bit more, but then obviously doing a little bit of less jobs. So again, it wasn't having a hugely profitable year. So year 2 came around, and at this point in time, I was like, fuck it. I went in full, student mode. I was just watching YouTube videos every day, listening to creative podcasts, design business podcasts. I just immersed myself into it, because I was like, something's got to change about that attitude. So, that all led me to eventually investing in online strategy courses. And I began actually learning how to speak the language of business, qualifying clients, briefing projects better, and obviously continued to raise rates through that. I figured out, ways to be more efficient, to be better, to create better outcomes. So obviously that comes with raising your rates as part of that. And also, after reaching out the year before, began to actually gain a little bit more studio and agency work. Became a little bit more regular, and I could actually schedule and plan things a little bit better. So that provided a nice bit of cushioning. I actually dove into calling myself Benson Design Co. I registered as a business name. Had a few friends that were freelancing at the time, so I really wanted to get them involved in projects and sort of start to evolve and adapt and try new things. And that strategy training and all these online courses actually prepared me really well, because I came across a group of Chinese investors and I landed a few really nice sort of branding jobs. I got some decent, quick, small wins. Got my confidence up, learned how to, manage really small projects. I did them frequently enough to gain a little bit of success. It's the end of that year. Again, I wasn't really at the point where I was happy. Again, continuing to raise those rates, get to $50 or $60 an hour eventually through that process. But particularly, obviously I wasn't satisfied financially, but at that sort of point in time, I realized, the price of freedom and independence. So began to understand, that contrast between a 9 to 5 and the flexibility I had. I could go help my parents out on a Friday, I could go to the beach on a Wednesday, and that really freed up a lot of mental sort of stress that was going on in my life at the time. I was still obviously working like 40 plus hours a week, just trying to put in the work. But at this point in time, I sort of knew that, things are going to work out, things are starting to shift. It's not, showing right now, but eventually it will. So yeah, year 3, I tested a whole bunch of these new methods, obviously the year before, with new sort of work. And, the opportunity came around to put proposals together for obviously, much larger sort of businesses. And I was actually able to test those sort of methods a little bit better. I knew that something was going right, because every month I was just constantly bidding for new work. And then it got to the point where I had other creative agencies and creative services asking me to white label my packages and things that I was putting together so they could sell on my behalf. And that worked out really, really well, because they took a lot of the pain and a lot of the time out of the creative sort of process. They'll manage to qualify a client and go through all that process of signing them and getting them on board with the project. I just had to go and execute it. So it freed up, a lot of my time throughout that process, and had a good little deal going on. And then I managed, obviously, to set up a really good relationship with studios and agencies as well. So I was booking time out months in advance. Really gave that sort of cushioning and sort of diversified the income that way. The other thing I also realised is that I needed to start broadening my creative outputs. So diversifying things into other areas of business. So I started another company called Uptop Productions. It's a little bit of a failure, but I don't really care. And so that was meant to be servicing a lot of video production, a lot of photography sort of work. And it didn't work out the way I wanted to, but I'm sort of happy that I took a risk and tried something different and developed that throughout the sort of process. So that didn't sort of reach the goals that I sort of set out to achieve, but I diversified and opened up what I was offering, which then again brought in a lot more sort of income. And that year I had that aha moment. I grew 83%, and finally had sustainable income after 3.5, 4 years. one thing I didn't know, and this is, life as a lesson, is that once you start earning over $40,000, you get taxed a whole nother new percentage. So everything that I, started saving and putting away, based off last year's income, which is 83% less, came to a screeching halt when they were like, oh, you owe us $12,500. So again, there's always lessons that are around the corner, and then you're constantly having to review your practice and the way you're sort of doing things. So cool. So that was the initial, couple of years into the industry. I just wanted to recap on sort of 3 key points. The first one was, the biggest thing that probably helped me was that I stopped charging hourly. So humans are notoriously bad estimators. How many times do you go to the grocery store and say, oh, I'm just going to get a few things, or you go to the pub with your mates and you're like, I'm just going to have a few drinks. It doesn't happen. And clients shouldn't have it both ways in that sort of process. If I work fewer hours, do I charge less? If I work more hours, do I charge more? Wrong. You don't, right? You actually punish yourself for being better and more efficient, and rather about focusing on things, how it could be more efficient, how to be quicker, you're focusing on how can I do things slower so I can earn more money. So, what clients truly value is time. And if, I can design a logo for you in 5 minutes, is that worth more or less than $10,000? I always say more, because you're ready to go to market right now. We're not fucking around, here it is, go, that's save your time. But it's a really tough mentality to fix and get yourself over. I really struggled to try and understand this. Charging hourly was all I really knew at that point in time. So yeah, it's one of those things I really applaud in the creative industry. I really want that sort of thing to take over. The next one is inputs versus outputs. So if you're selling identity design, logos, a creative sort of output, it's a set number of variables, right? Maybe it's 3 concepts, color palettes and patterns and graphic devices. And so if a client comes to you with something that's bigger than that, it's a bigger problem than what you've experienced before, you're always going to be forced to say you need to redo your identity design. This is a really big problem, and it's a misalignment. So as independent creative people, you have to always be looking at what you're offering and what your output is. So you don't have to do anything for the client per se. You do, however, have to speak the common language of business so they can understand you and see where you're coming from. And sometimes it's about just speaking to them in the language that they understand. So what's driving this? What does success look like? How are we going to measure this? What are the things that are going to be involved in determining this project? What's motivating these sort of things? So, what that does is actually allows you to make recommendations that are outside the scope of the work that you just do yourself. So you can go say, hey, you need to get an app developer in to do this better, or you need to get a social media strategist to do this. And what that does is provide a lot more value to the service that you're providing, even though that you're not necessarily involved in that sort of process, or you may be managing it throughout that. And then they trust you more, and then the bill that you are charging at the end of the day is justified a lot better. And the final thing is raise your prices. So every time a new client comes in, you have to raise your price. You've got to have that DJ Khaled mentality, another one. You just got to keep going. So, and the key here is to really position yourself as an expert, not a service provider. So if you're an expert, then you're always busy. And so when you're always busy, what you're doing is creating a really interesting problem, which is supply versus demand. And it's a really simple trick, but I feel like too many creatives sort of seek approval from others. We feel when a client likes our work and they're like, we want you to do more, and they come back, we sort of get caught in that trap of devaluing our own services, almost to the detriment of our own good. So the key to breaking this is imagine negotiating this on someone else's behalf. So if you just imagine it, and it can be completely made up, it doesn't have to be a real person, negotiating on behalf of someone else, you're going to be an absolute pitbull throughout that sort of process. It's probably to someone you don't even know, but it doesn't matter. The fact that you're removing yourself throughout that sort of process lets you sort of justify your position and really hold your ground a little bit better. And so yeah, if you're willing to fight for that person, but put yourself in the same situation, most people go $500, fuck yeah, let's do it, let's get the ball rolling. So spend some time and energy on yourself because you're always worth it at the end of the day. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Henry. That was some really good points, similar to some of the points I'll bring up in my one as well, particularly the one around not charging based on time. It's a very good point, I think. So I'm going to spin it a little bit more from the other side. So I'll tell you a little bit more about my background first, and then I can tell you sort of the way I'm going to structure some of the things I've learned over the last few years. So I started my life as a traditional graphic designer, worked for a number of studios over a few years, did the thing of wanting to start our own business. So a friend of mine, Dan, and myself, we ended up starting our own studio, which we ended up operating for about 5 to 6 years. Ended up growing that to the point where we had a team of roughly 8 or 9 people, running a fairly efficient studio. Then at some point, we, during a period where the business has gone through a bit of a downturn, I started looking at a few other opportunities. One of those opportunities was actually to move into an in-house environment where instead of building a design agency, it would move towards building an in-house team, and in this case, it was a lighting brand. So I guess the way I would frame today's conversation is really around what I've learned from one side of the equation, which is from an in-house side in the last 3 years, and then from running a studio, because I think there's some important lessons when you're on the other side now, where I'm running an in-house team, and now we are the ones that are actually procuring service providers, as opposed to being the one offering services. So it's interesting to sit on the opposite side, where we are the ones that are actually negotiating with designers, we're negotiating with developers, we're negotiating with management consultants, and we're talking to them about what their offering is. And it's been interesting to see exactly what Tom was saying before, taking yourself out of your shoes normally, where you're the one that's pitching to a client and being the one that's being pitched to. It's a very interesting perspective to sort of see, you pick up things that other people are doing that you might have seen that you were doing previously, but seeing it from the other side. It's a very interesting thing, actually. So in the last 3 years, I've gone from selling services to selling products, from being a service provider when we were running the studio to now being the service procurer. And interestingly, I guess, speaking a little bit about, there's a lot of times we get questions about what it actually involves being an in-house designer or being an in-house creative, and what it's like compared to working for a studio. So the idea of working for a single brand versus working on many different client projects over a period of time can seem initially like something that's not as creatively fulfilling, but there's a few guys who actually work for Unios, so hopefully they're finding that working for a singular brand is actually just as fulfilling as working for many different brands, because you really get to see when the rubber hits the road, what happens at the end of all that, and what the actual tangible results are. And the other interesting thing is, previously when we were running the studio, it was all about educating clients on the value of design, really talking to clients about, hey, you should take us on board because of X, Y, Z, and you should really value design in your organization. But the flip side now in the last couple of years has been, how do we, Unios, as a lighting brand, build a design valued culture internally? And I guess even more so, one step further than that, is building a design-led culture, which is where everything in our business is led by design at the beginning. So one of the first things, I guess, I ruminated on in the last couple of days when I was going through this is when we were running the studio versus when now I'm meeting a lot of people and they're offering their services to us, is the value of design has to come from the organization itself. Within the organization itself, there has to be a value and respect for the craft and the process from the very top of the organization. Often, particularly when we're just starting out as designers and we're just trying to get work going and getting momentum going, we can try to just take on any work that comes through our door, and we try to push the value of design onto just anyone who's willing to have a conversation. But I truly believe now, particularly at Unios, where we've in the last 3 years, we've built from a team of 12 people to 70 people in the last 3 years, is that value of design really has to come from within, and particularly from the management level. If the people at the very top of the organization believe in the process and the craft of design, then it just makes it so much easier to embed a new system, a new identity, a new process, whatever it is, into the business. The other thing I thought about recently was the idea that when you have very similar types of people running a business, it can often be everyone's doing very similar things or understands very similar things. The way our business is set up, it's on the leadership team is an accountant, an engineer, and a designer. And what really has worked about that versus when I think about in hindsight when we're running a studio is we all come from creative backgrounds. And when you get 10 designers in a room to discuss something, and it could be something that's not even design, it could be the financial performance of the business over the last 3 months, we all come from the same place and we all come from the same mindset and the same thought patterns. When you have different people who have different perspectives from different, areas of expertise, it really does, I think, assist, and today's conversations around pricing, it really does assist with things like pricing. If you have someone in the room or someone on the leadership team or a board in your business that comes from a perspective that isn't, oh, we just want to make the best quality work, but we also want to maximize our gross profit and all these sort of things, then it really does, I think, assist in the process of growing your business. So I've structured this particular talk just around a couple of, general reflections now that I've sat on the other side for a couple of years and worked with a number of different types of consultants, and the things that we have sort of identified when we are choosing service providers or consultants for different areas of our business. I think the first one is ask why, not when, serve, not sell. Recently we were switching up who was doing a lot of the SEO and Google AdWords work that we were outsourcing to an agency here in WA, and we kind of had a couple of different companies come in and talk to us about what their business offering was and how they could work with us on this particular long-term retainer-based work. And the first company came in and they had their presentation already. They asked to plug in their HDMI cable, and away they went. They fired away. They've worked for these amazing clients. They've done stuff for Rio Tinto. They've done stuff for BHP, and these are the services we offer, and this is our leadership team, and combined we have worked together for 150 years or something like that. And then the second company came in on the same day, and they didn't have a PowerPoint presentation. They didn't have an HDMI cable they wanted to plug in. All they said was, tell me more about your business and what the problems are in your business that we can discuss about. And they asked us question after question. We'd ask one question, they'd follow up with another question, and then they'd follow up with another question. And they were furiously jotting notes down for the entire 60 minutes, and only in the last 5 minutes did they actually mention, hey, let's just give you a 5-minute spiel about what our business actually is. Following day, we got a follow-up email from that second business, and they summarized everything that we discussed and identified where they could and they couldn't assist on all the points that they actually jotted down. And then the first company that came in, they simply followed up with their formulaic email saying, thanks for the meeting, here's a proposal of the services we offer. How would they even know the services that we require if they haven't actually identified what we actually require? Because they only asked literally one question during the entire 1-hour meeting. So I guess the thing that I always say is you really, even though we're all designers, is we have to be more like a consultant than a designer, and really be diagnostic in that very first meeting we have with clients. In these conversations when we're really trying to get a project over the line or meeting a client, our natural inclination can always be, we just have to sell. We have to show them everything we've done. We've done these amazing mock-ups over the last couple of months of the work we've done. We spent so much time on them, so let's show them all our mock-ups of all the work we've done, and that will get them over the line. Whereas Tom mentioned before, which is you really have to understand the perspective someone's coming from, because we are designers, but most of the population aren't designers, and we're not going to understand the same perspective you're coming from if all you're doing is showing, these are the last 6 projects we worked on, and these are the services that we offer. So be the one asking the questions, not the ones answering them. And ultimately, I think with the consultants we have ongoing relationships with, you end up being a sounding board. Whenever they have a design-related question, or even a question they kind of think is design-related or design thinking related, they pick up the phone and they say, hey, can you help us out on this sort of thing, or what are your thoughts on this? And that's what I think leads to that long-term trust and genuineness in the relationship. The second thing I would say is there's no right or wrong way, really. This pricing discussion, everyone kind of has their own perspective about how they should price, and every agency prices in a different way, and every consultant prices in a different way. I think what I've learned, and I was talking to someone who'd been doing freelance consultant-based work for the past 30 years, and they said they're still tinkering away with their pricing model to this day, 30 years later, from the point when they started to now. Every year they review, what is it about our pricing model that we could tinker with slightly. So we work with consultants of all shapes and sizes, so I think this is a kind of interesting thing because we can often get so bogged down in sort of how does a graphic designer price, how does a designer price their work. But it's also interesting to, I guess, in the last couple of years, see how different types of consultants price their work, not just designers, but we're talking about management consultants, a recruitment consultant, a UX consultant, might even be an ERP consultant. Currently we're working with a sales consultant. And every single one of these consultants that we have ongoing relationships with currently prices us in a different way. They all kind of have different ways or formulas with which they price their work. Some of them are time-based, some of them are, this is a project, this is the value of the project. Some of them are milestone-based, some of them are on retainers, and some of them, if you're talking like recruitment, or you're talking about building a new building and architecture, it might be a percentage of the total cost of a building, or a percentage of the cost of the hire of an employee, for example. So time-based, we went through this just before, but this is probably the most infrequent way we pay now, in terms of straight up, this takes 10 hours, my hourly rate is, well, let's takes 32 hours, my hourly rate is $160 an hour. That's probably the most infrequent way we've seen from all these consultants we work with at the moment. None of them actually charge us this way at the moment. The second one is that idea of pricing and value, which Tom alluded to before, which is this work is just priced at this amount. You might have more detailed breakdown of different stage gates or different points in the project, or what the deliverables are. And it's interesting to see how, I guess it's a confidence thing as well as a industry perception thing, but it's interesting to see how a lawyer might put together a proposal versus a management consultant. The management consultant might break down in detail some of the things they're providing, whereas the lawyer, they might just literally say, this piece of work that I need to do for you, it's going to be straight up $10,000, sometimes just in an email even. So it's interesting to see how they also put together a proposal in a different way. Milestone-based is something we do recently, which we're pushing a couple of our consultants more towards as well, which is the idea that often we need to kickstart the project with a strategy piece of some sort. Something to just get an idea or would validate an idea whether that project should even go ahead. So often we'll get that piece of the work done first, and we know the value and the cost of that work, and then at that point we'll decide at what point we might go to the next stage, because the immediate future it might be we'll stop here and then we'll look at it again in the next financial year, or we'll look at it again in 6 months' time. Retainer base, it's fairly common for I guess our industry, as well as for things like SEO services and that sort of thing, which is just a monthly ongoing cost. The third reflection is, I guess, the idea that you're not always going to be the right designer, or they're not always going to be the right client, and you're not always going to be at the right price, and that's okay. I think, particularly for people just starting out, that's a very important lesson, the fact that not every client that comes through and you have a conversation with is going to be the right client for you, nor are you going to be the right designer for them, because if you know your value and you charge accordingly, you should stick to that fairly hard and fast, in my opinion at least. I can probably count on one hand the number of times where someone said to you, hey, give me a discount on this very first project and the follow-up projects that actually we're going to pay you the full price. I don't think that happens very often. I think most likely they use you for that first project, and then if you charge them according to the next project, they'll say, oh, who else is a designer that we could also speak to that will also go with the discount structure for their first project. So know your value, charge accordingly. Ensure you're the right fit for client, not just the other way around. And set the right tone for the relationship from the beginning. Because from that very first meeting and that conversation you have, that's setting the tone for the, if you're the one that's saying, look, we can actually reduce our price for this project, that sets the tone for the relationship going forward. And the last thing I would say is play the long game, which is we've had a couple of situations in the last couple of years where someone has quoted some work with us and we've basically said, look, we've budgeted a certain amount, we just simply can't actually afford that cost of that project at that time. And that particular person has said, all right, that's fine, maybe we're not the right fit for this project right now. And quite literally, I think it was 12 to 18 months later, we came back to that same person and said, look, actually we're now in a better spot to do that project, let's go ahead and do it. So I think don't feel too reluctant to, I guess, turn it away initially, because often if they go forward and then they live on their lives for another year, they may just come back and get that project with you the next time at the fee that you'd originally intended. And the last thing ties in with, I guess, the thing I've been alluding to for a lot of this conversation, which is I'm looking for a long-term relationship. Every consultant that we deal with at the moment, and any designer we deal with, we're always looking for someone who is a long-term right-hand person for us. And they almost become an expert, not just in their field, but they also become an expert in our business. And I think that's probably, if you take anything away from what I say today, it's the most crucial thing is, if you can really show that you understand someone's business in an in-depth way, their distribution strategy, their pricing model, the way they enter the market with their products or their services, not only does that inform your design better, but it shows that you genuinely can better inform and better improve their business in whatever outcome they want, whether they're looking to improve the reputation of their business, or whether sales are down because of whatever reason the competitors are entering into the market. If you can become an expert in their business as well, long-term business at the end of the day is the best kind of work you can get, because new sales takes a lot of work. It's hard work to constantly be chasing new sales. You want that long-term business, that project that just keeps ticking over year after year after year, because that's the bedrock of a business at the end of the day. And just build that trust with genuineness and transparency. Tom was saying before how if you make a recommendation that's not even in your wheelhouse, it might be, we don't actually do this service, but that's actually what you don't need a website right now. What you actually need is to go see this particular person, because that's what you need before you actually build the website. That is what transparency, I guess, of genuineness is about. So in summary, I guess, be diagnostic. Very important to just always be asking questions. Don't go in straight up with your PDF and your pitch. Fine-tune your formula, because you'll forever be fine-tuning your formula to the day you retire. You'll be still looking at the way you're pricing. Who knows what pricing will look like in 30 years' time. Be ready to walk away from a project or a client if it's not the right fit. And invest in your client's success. If you do a project and then you know that that's launching in 3 months, or they're having an important event at the end of the year which your particular project is involved in, put something in your calendar just to say, hey, give them a call or send them an email, set up a meeting a couple of weeks after that, just to sort of say, how did that go? How did that thing I created for you perform? How could we make it better for next time? Those are the kind of things that build that long-term relationship and trust. So yeah, that's it for today. Thank you.
Please excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. I've still got a bit of a cough. So, okay. I'm Amy. I'm a graphic designer. Although these days I don't feel like that's necessarily a great fit for me. I've been pushing more into customer experience and service design after finding I'm more of a consultant these days as well. I actually graduated with a Bachelor of Design a very long time ago, nearly 15 years ago now, which makes me feel very old. And I started in print. I was a rubbish student, absolutely rubbish. So I was floored that I actually someone called me up and offered me a job. And I got the job and I worked in a really dodgy, gigantic print house as the in-house graphic designer. And I hated it. I really hated it. I was earning about $15.30 an hour, but it was time well spent. It was really, really good time well spent, and I would say that it was valuable. So for me, time is valuable because what I've realised is that all of these choices, even the bad ones that I've made, have actually meant that I can charge for my experience and I can charge for my time in certain ways. So out of this, it was 3 months that I was actually at this print house, and I ended up meeting my first client, who is still with me today. After 15 years, I still work with this client frequently, and she has referred me to a huge range of clients as well. And I also got my first contract, and after I think 3 months of graduating, I had a freelance business that I was running, which was really cool. So I got the pay rise to $20 an hour. Which I thought was amazing because it was about, I think, $8 more than what Coles used to pay me, so that was pretty cool. And then by the end of the year, I was onto my second contract, and it was about $25 an hour, and I landed a contract with a really awesome studio called the Ren Press. And I don't know if anyone knows the Ren Press. They don't really exist anymore. Ren Design does, which was the original company. But Ren Press used to design wedding stationery, and that was really totally my jam because I got to design things that were foiled and embossed and Vercoed and play with expensive papers, and everything was done in Pantones. It was just absolute print porn for me. So, and I got to design illustrations and patterns and do really, really fun things all the time. So for my first year out of uni, to land that job was phenomenal. And then 3 years after that, I actually had some of the designs that I ended up freelancing out of this studio as well, published as well. So it was really, really cool and really valuable. It was only part-time as well, but the great thing about that was that I ended up teaching a little bit at ECU as well, and slowly building up my portfolio and pushing more into branding, which was really fantastic. So I started specialising more as a brand manager. So I'd work with a lot of small to medium businesses and a lot of agencies and studios as well, looking after projects that required someone external, that excited an external team. And so slowly I'd move from that 25 an hour to 50 to 75 to 100 and now at 150. So, and what I realised is that even though there were a ton of mistakes, is that all of that time, it doesn't matter about the money, it's the time that was valuable. So I've created a little love triangle to talk about, I suppose, my philosophy on where I've landed in terms of design. I think that you can't look at creating design or deliverables without looking at your process, the time that you put into it, and the money that you spend or earn. Okay, the balance between those three, to me, is hugely important. So time is valuable. A question that I've been chatting with quite a few peers of mine has been whether you should bill on time or bill on value. I bill on time, and it works for me because I'm a terrible procrastinator. And so having clear boundaries on time actually makes me more efficient, and it makes me work a little bit harder as well. But it also means that it forces me to be really, really disciplined. In saying that, I do think that my billable rate is a reflection, or the rates that I have is a reflection of that value as well. But I don't think that we can just think about time in terms of my time as the billable time. I think we need to think about the client's time, how important that is, and how we use and optimise their time, how we use our billable time, and how important that is in building that business and, I suppose, pushing our reputation, if you like. And then where we invest our time. So things like this, these networking events, going out and meeting your peers, building up networking groups, all of that has been hugely, hugely valuable to me in building my business and in getting clients in the door as well. Even the little freebies that you do, there's so many wedding invitations that you end up doing as a graphic designer, it's ridiculous, but it's funny how it leads to so many referrals down the track as well. And then how we manage our time, and the big one is avoiding wasting it. And something, as a procrastinator, I'm constantly thinking of ways that I need to not waste time and to be way more efficient and to be, I suppose, more ethical in my billing as well. So for me, I think I need to look at processes. I don't mean just process in terms of your creative process, or that is very important. I mean process in terms of all of your processes in how you operate your business. So I will start with creative process because it does intend to inform everything. I think, particularly through teaching, I've been recognising that everyone has this huge diversity of process that works for them. We cannot tell you, and we tell it at uni, we say this is the process that you have to follow, but it doesn't work for everyone as well. And I think you have to be really, really honest about how you work and how you want to work in your business. And speaking from someone who I've just been working inside a company, Burberry, I was working as an account manager and then later a project director as well. It's really hard to cater for everyone's individual needs when it comes to creative process, but I think we certainly need to be able to create the space for that as well. So when I look at my creative process and how I'm going to bill a job, I start to think about what I need, what are the boundaries that I'm going to need to work. And where I've landed is that I need to work in blocks. So I would work in, I suppose, a research block, then maybe an experimentation block, and then a prototyping, and finally a production block. And in between those, I treat these as milestones. And those key milestones are points at where I can check in with the client, check in with time, and actually really reflect hard on how efficiently I am working. And the big one for me is the wall. The creative block that we all tend to get on the really, really big projects, and they always seem to happen. And I have come to the conclusion that if I'm not hitting the wall, I'm not working hard enough. I'm not questioning that brief hard enough. I'm probably creating something that's predefined and not great enough, and therefore not giving value to my clients as well. So now, because I'm a freelancer these days, I have the flexibility to spend and lose a bit of my time in making sure that I can push through that. But when you're working in a studio, it can be a lot more difficult, I suppose. The next one is going to be systems and processes. That's worth looking at as well. I mean, when I'm talking about system and process, I think it's worth looking in isolation at things like, what is your quality control system? How are you doing this? Because we tend to connect these into our creative process, but I find that by isolating them and thinking about these as extensions, we can start to find the ways that we can increase that value in our design as well. Something that I'm really paying attention to a lot is dealing with distraction. I've been listening to this fantastic podcast called Hurry Slowly, which I can highly recommend. And what I'm finding is that even if you block your time, plan ahead, create really, really clear boundaries, turn your emails off, there are still ways that we can be distracted that you probably don't even realise. And what it is it's really just being mindful on when your focus is being pulled. So I have my phone on silent all the time, and I screen my phone calls, and I don't answer emails when I'm working on those big creative blocks of time, but my phone gets notifications and alerts, and I might see that flash up on my screen, and that is enough to pull you out of that focus. So turning on Do Not Disturb, and by the way, do you guys know that you can do that on your Mac as well? You can do that on your computer, you can turn Do Not Disturb mode on. Oh my God, it's heaven. It's so good when you just, all of a sudden, no one can get in contact with you, and you can just focus. The other thing that I've realised is music can be a huge distraction too. Has anyone ever opened up Spotify thinking this will be a great kind of music playlist to get me into the mood, and then there's that one song that is just enough to really throw your mood off, and then all of a sudden you're focused on how irritating that song is, and therefore you're now distracted and you're not focusing on that, and therefore you're not actually working on the job anymore and actually I suppose, creating that value and really using your time efficiently as well. So distraction is a big one for me to really focus on. Obviously time management, I've mentioned that I try and block time, and I also like to have what I call my marination time. So in between big kind of milestones, I like to take a time to reflect before I present to the client. So I might take 1 or 2 days, even though the job's done, or that stage is done, just to take that time to really come back to it fresh every couple of days before I actually push it through, and to go back to the brief and really question if I have put that value in there, and be hugely reflective as well. And then lastly, the clarity of communication is a big one. And this is how you communicate your worth to your client, how you communicate problems that you may have come across, throughout the process, and even little things like how you quote. So for example, even though I do charge a billable hour, I've actually started pulling the hours that I include in my job out of the quote. So I've started to rely on that scope, because I have found that when you put hours in there are clients that are going to go, oh, that's your price, I'll divide that by how many hours, and then I'll figure out your hourly rate, and then all of a sudden they're going, you're too expensive, how are you charging this much? And this could be a huge problem. So taking that out means that you're giving that perception of value, even though I am technically billing on time. I've started, because a lot of my work has moved away recently from, I suppose, graphic design and building brands into, I suppose, a bit of business and service and a lot of consultation. I've started to look at what I'm charging for a little bit differently. So things like project management, consultation and liaison, workshop and training, research, proposals, reporting and meetings are all things that have popped up. So I'll tell you about 2 projects that went very wrong for me. There was a really big project that I had a couple of years ago, and it was a really big meaty project. It was going to run for 9 months, and I was really excited because it was something that was going to see me through for the year, and it was very creative. I had a lot of boundaries and I had a lot of lead for it. But the person that I was working with, and I found this out after we got going, I found out that she was calling me all of the time, every day, calling me, telling me the same thing she told me 3 days ago, and then constantly requesting these meetings. And within the first, I think it was 3 weeks, she just about chewed up 80% of a 9-month budget. And it was just ridiculous. And at that point, I had to kind of go, whoa, this is not what we agreed on, so that clarity of communication, this is not what we agreed on. I quoted on deliverables, not project management, consultation, meeting time, and we had to renegotiate something as well. And that project still burns me and haunts me to this day, but I got a lot out of it, and I learned quite a fair bit out of that too. And then there was another client that I've been working with for over a decade, and I'd just done their rebrand, and then they went and hired another web designer to kind of design the website. And I was crushed. I was absolutely crushed until the project didn't go so well with the web designer. And then all of a sudden I got called up to do some consultation on the project, and it ended up being a really valuable experience, because the client actually hired me to come in as their brand manager to ensure that the branding was consistently applied and adhere to the designs that we had kind of tried to specify as well. So that was really great, coming out of learning to consult and to work with other people quite early in the career. This was probably about 6 years into my career as well, and finding that this was something that I could start to offer, and it meant that I started to rethink what my worth is. And so I've started to actually use a fee schedule. I now quote based on strategic design, brand management, consultation, and I have an agency rate as well. And it's allowed me to be a little bit more flexible, but to also be honest with the kind of clients that I work with as well, because there are a lot of small businesses, really, a lot of them really only need consultation. They don't have the budget, but they do need that help to be pushed in a certain direction. Whereas strategic is allowing me to work on some much media projects, and probably down the track I'll have some set prices as well. And then lastly, I guess, the biggest thing that I've learnt throughout my career is that I need to build rapport throughout everything. You cannot communicate your worth and your value to your clients if you don't invest on building relationships. And that's not just with your clients, that's with your peers and your suppliers as well. I've got a lot of referral from suppliers, and my peers I rely on for support when I'm working on projects or I need someone to talk through certain designs with as well. So when I go into a first consultation, I think that the biggest thing is first impressions absolutely last. So I tend to go in with a bit of an agenda for clients, and what I mean by an agenda is that I've done a little bit of research on who that client is, I've written down some questions, I just want a few things to be answered, but I just really sit there and listen. Listen, guide, and listen. Really listen, or as Henry said, diagnose what it is that they actually need. Be generous with your time as well when you're working with the clients. And then this is the big one. If you set your expectations, your outcomes, and be transparent with your client in that first meeting, that completely sets you up for the rest of your working relationship with that client, or as I said, peer or supplier as well. Really tell them about how you work, what your processes are. Make sure that they understand those things, and give them an expectation on their project, on what they're going to experience as well. And then reiterate that over and over and over and over again. Every time you meet with them, take that as an opportunity to reset those expectations and outcomes. And once you do that, or once I've done that, I have found that actually becomes, it helps you to build such a great rapport with them, so that it gets easier. And then when bad things happen, all of a sudden you've got this, and they do happen, you will make mistakes in those jobs. All of a sudden you've got this great basis to where you can negotiate something and still end up working with people for a really, really long time. So lastly, I guess my simplest little thing is that you can't expect people to value your work if you don't earn it. So earn it. You need to work on your business, and you need to work on all of the things that are non-billable, I suppose, to be able to get those billables.
Hello. Okay, so I'm filling in for Anthony, and thanks for updating the slide. And after listening to all those talks Tom, Henry, Amy, they were awesome, and reflecting on a lot of my own experiences. I actually wish I had my own set of slides up here to talk to, but Anthony's just dumped these on me, so I'm going to talk a little bit to them. But before I get into it, I think I wanted to just reflect a little bit on the journey that I've been on to date as well. 11 years in to essentially my journey as a creative. We started in a share house, and it was a party essentially, and we thought that we were going to do something cool, and in fact even in the first year I think we just threw a big party at the bakery, and all our money went into that. I think we had 36 bands and 2 fashion catwalk shows, a book launch, and a whole bunch of stuff. And we thought that maybe that's what our business was going to be. It just turned out to be the best marketing exercise we ever did. Off the back of that, we really cemented our brand into the local culture scape. And from there, we sort of timed our run with, I guess, the rise of digital. And as a result, we were broke, right? I think we paid ourselves $450 a week. So we're going to talk money. Between that first year, when we were, really scraping by, to now we're a $5 million business, and you talk about paying tax over the 40K mark, try paying payroll tax. Once you pay over $750 worth of wages, it slaps you. And money is hard. Money is a conversation that people, shy away from, and they don't need to. It's a game. And I think what I was sort of reflecting on while I was sitting there and listening to everyone was, it's a hustle. It's fun, and it should be fun. So Anthony Nankervis, that's not me. And I would never put Kim Kardashian on any of my presentations. But he wanted to talk about it, so for him, he sort of said, money, the machine of money, right? And the machine of business. Business doesn't have to be serious. And like, as much as, like, Henry, listening to you talk, man, it was awesome actually. Really valuable insights in there, so please take a lot away from that. And the crafts people, Amy, amazing. You are a craftsman and now a consultant. But it's a hustle, and I think like what people forget is that it's a bit of a game. You can make money out of anything you want to do. Look at her, right? And the craziness of what she has done in this world. But she's making billions of dollars. Like, it's just ridiculous. So, few lessons in here that I'm going to sort of reflect on, and then probably go zigzag sideways out of as I talk to not my content. So, I think you have to set the terms up front, and I agree with this one big time. As much as you can pour time into a client, you can absolutely listen and craft the way that you enter and work with a client. There is no linear pathway, there's no set process, but you should definitely set your payment terms up front and be super clear about it. And I think you need to take money right up front and put that in the bank. So I think when you charge for something, it's like this event. You pay for your ticket, you rock up. If you're not going to give me some cash, maybe you're not so invested in it. So charge what you think you're worth up front and take as much as you can. I charge 100% sometimes up front on some of the strategy work that I do these days. Just not because I'm trying to do a cash grab, more that like they can afford it, and why not, right? Like, it's better in my bank than theirs at that point in time. So if you can, do it, is what I would say. But don't be a dick about it either. So I think installment invoices, obviously when you reach milestones, whatever they are, whatever that looks like for you and your business, and set those out at the start. Like, I know that not all processes are linear, and in fact, in the creative industries, sometimes they rarely are. But if you do get a process that you refine and the market likes it, and you want to roll that out and try and scale it, well then make those milestones pretty solid. And I would suggest that it's a 60% up front, and then just take the minor installments on the tail end of the project. Again, trying to get as much as you can up front, early as you can. And again, it's because, well, I believe that the majority of the value is up front anyway. That's where you do your thinking, that's where you do your learning and your problem solving, and then you execute afterwards. And I'm lucky enough to have a team of amazing people executing behind me, so I can sort of transfer that trust. But up front, if you while you've got them energized and engaged, I would suggest that you stack your milestone payments up front and do that as best possible. And I think also, refinements, revisions, alterations, what do you want to call them? Whatever you want to call them. It's you're never going to solve this one. No one will ever solve this one. I think you just have to be upfront with what that looks like. If it's additional time, sure. If it's a client that you really, really want and you're stable of clients and you just want to suck it up, well then that's your decision. Sometimes, we do that. I'm the world's worst, by the way. I don't know why I'm talking about money inside my agency. I'm actually the worst when it comes to this. I'm definitely more of a big picture thinker guy, and if I was in charge of our finances, we would be broke. But I think contingency is a good thing. It's not always possible with smaller clients. They just won't pay for it. But certainly when you're dealing with the corporates, they come to you typically with allocated budgets anyway. And so I would suggest that you put a 5 to 10% contingency, and they're expecting it a lot of the times, larger clients that is. But yeah, I think you can also build that into your hourly price. So if you are charging by time, just make sure that there's enough buffer in there and giving yourself some contingency so that you don't lose, essentially. And a lot of talk tonight about time versus value. I think it's the ultimate question in our game is, the word value is a funny one. I've always thought about it. I had a business coach, Rob Bentley. He's a pretty insightful guy, and he said, price plus experience equals value. And he said, you go to a restaurant, you get a great meal, and you get a beautiful service, and the whole atmosphere, everything about it is amazing. You pay $300 for that degustation, right? And you walk away going, wow, that was awesome value. Got a really good deal there. And then equally rocking up to whatever takeaway stand with someone that definitely doesn't want to be in the kitchen, giving you some crap that you're eating, and you don't want to be there, they don't want to be there, and then you hand over your $6 to $10, whatever the hell it is these days, and you feel cheated. And it's like, wow, it's not about price. Value is about price plus experience. So it's a simple equation, but one that you can just translate to absolutely anything. So it's a funny one. We have retainers and we have hourly packages at Juicebox. That's absolutely there. But there are also different products, processes, and different things that we don't talk hours on. And certainly when you're having a conversation with the client, I don't talk time. And I definitely take a page out of Henry's book, and it's all about the why and the learning. You can talk about the money offline a lot of the times. I think in the room, you should really be talking and showing why they need you and why the relationship's going to be of mutual benefit. And it's a two-way street. Like I talk about mutual benefit, and maybe that's something that probably needs to be highlighted. Is they need you, but you need them as well, and it goes both ways. And I think you have to sort of acknowledge that up front. And certainly once you've built your repertoire and your own brand, then that is exactly what it is. So try not to talk hours, and go into that room knowing what you're talking about and knowing who you're talking to. And I'm not just talking about signing up to LinkedIn Premium and doing a deep dive on crew, but going into, I've done that, but going actually into the industry. Perth's a small town, so you can pretty much go with the industries that I sort of know and specialise in. I pretty much know a lot of the players, and I know how things have evolved for those businesses. And when you go into those meeting rooms and you're having those conversations and you're sharing that anecdotal evidence and you're conversing, and it just doesn't become about time or a commodity or a service at that point. You are literally two people, two businesses, two brands, sort of just sharing equity, and you realise the value of the partnership. So yeah, go and do your research and show that you know what you're talking about. And yeah, don't be scared of profit. Revenue's one thing, profit is another. And I thank my business partner Chris Nelson, who's our managing director, for profit. He's an absolute crazy when it comes to optimization. He's a web developer, and when we were sitting in that share house, he was just coding away. And he's a great coder. He actually won Side of the Day on awards. He won Innovation, Most Innovative Side of the Year at the Oz Web Awards. He is a great developer. So having a developer who's become a managing director, he's also built our in-house management software. So our whole agency runs on the piece of software that he built. And as a result, he can pull up data on anything. And he does. And he optimizes the shit out of us. And profit is the result. And again, I just think, when you're pricing out a job and you're scoping all your work, make sure that you are layering that profit margin in there. And I don't know what it looks like for everyone. For us, we aim for about 20%. That we've been told that anywhere between 15 to 30 is good. If you're running above 30, geez, you're doing all right. So try to build in some profit, and have courage. As I said, going back to the hustle, play the game and be bold. You will benefit, even if not everyone likes it. It's not for everyone sometimes, and you will lose people on occasion just because you're too bold. But on the other hand, you can win big as well. And I think if you truly believe in what you're pitching and what you want to do with a client, well then have the courage to just go do it. Sort of backs up that last point, I guess. But just be quiet. You don't have to be loud either when you're being bold. You can just be quietly confident as well. Tone is important, certainly when you're reading the room. And I think this point was sort of spoken about a few times from the other guys tonight. Like, you're just not a match for everyone, and that's always going to be there. So to end and go full circle, an idiot with a plan can beat a genius without a plan, and that's from Warren Buffett, and that's certainly what she's done. So I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I firstly just want to acknowledge how amazing it is we're in an industry where our contemporaries and colleagues are willing to speak about something that is as taboo as money. I don't think there is any other industry where people are so open and willing to help and give insight to others that they may be competition for. So what's going to happen now is we're going to have a 10-minute break, go to the bathroom, avail yourself of some fine beverages from the Oxford Hotel in moderation, and we'll come back 10 minutes and we'll have a panel. Please have any questions that you'd like to ask our speakers ready, and we'll go from there. So 10 minutes. Thanks.
We The thing about everyone's just you're running a business, they're running a different type of business. So you guys are based on this? Oh, you don't have to build it. I was going to say the landlord must come down with the happy.
Well, that's what these are as well.
Oh
no! We don't get out much though, so it's Sean next go. We're just going to start re-engaging. We need a beer. Henry came and saw me about 10 years ago.
That is
the inside. From outside. You're there,
running a business. Chat about what the business does and how business does.
Give up a good right and take week
picked it up well, but it's not your slide. That's the first time you've seen it. Well played, yeah, that would have thrown you. What am I thinking? Sort of idea. Like the traditional, hey, you're a bill, we don't like it.
They never get out of stuff. So what else? They still think they're amazing, but they've never yeah, now I'm and then yeah, they were setting house years ago, and then yeah, how close to you where you got yeah, comes back, it's all there. You're not going to. Oh, you're always fighting money. I can't do it.
Yeah, we get the account.
I remember they were like, I can't do it, and I put up a website. That's cool. So rare. So you're looking at now yeah. I think you'll be okay. But I take things from every single and also that, yeah, you think but it's, yeah, well, I mean, it's just never
Hi everyone, we're back.
Good chat. Thank you.
Hi everyone, how are you? Coming back. My panelists, free to answer any questions you may have, please be respectful. Anyone have any questions?
So I was kind of just wondering, like, everyone's sort of opinion on, like, when you price your packages, how much, like, do you put more money into, like, your strategy side or, like, your sort of crafting side of things? So, like, do you spend more time, like, charging for materials on your strategic and, like, you know, thinking, or do you spend more time on, like, brand, like, actually making stuff?
Anyone?
I think that's a great question, but I don't do packages. So I looked at doing it once, but what I found was it was really hard to come up with a package that would apply to every client as well. So instead I would look at it from the perspective of I would create territories. So there are set territories that we always have in every project, and in some cases the strategy territory is going to be massive. It's going to be really, really huge, and I think if you spend the time in those early discovery meetings or consultations, you can really figure out where that is, and that's why I would never give pricing until you've basically put that set in stone. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess reiterating that point, you know, like you sort of price the client on their needs, like not really on what you're selling or what you're sort of confident in. So, you know, like you said, it changes from project to project. You know, there's no cookie cutter sort of way around it. You know, you've got to be flexible and adapt to what is required there. I mean, generally speaking, strategy normally informs a lot of the outcomes and drives a lot of the process. So it makes sense that the investment is always there up front. Whether they continue designing with you or not, you know, they go somewhere else. You know, that's generally the starting point or the launching point for any sort of project. So, yeah, probably say that is a hefty part of it, and sometimes it does outweigh a lot of the outcomes because it obviously is reflective of that and informs everything else.
Pretty much the same thing. It's always contextual. It's pretty much every time you got to take the situation as it comes, because in some circumstances the business might require a heavy amount of deep thinking before any execution might happen. And other times there might be other people involved and they've gotten to a stage where execution is fairly close to ready to happen. It just really depends.
Client by client, case by case, but we scaled and grew our business on hours and volume. Our biggest growth piece was, and then I guess we reached a point where we're like, wow, we just need more bums on seats and more work here, and this is just crazy because you have to feed that. You have to win a hell of a lot of work, and you have to basically keep that going. What we're seeing, I get in our sort of just post our 10 years in business, is a shift back the other way and charging a lot more and doing a lot more work in the strategy space, and even trying to bring our whole team into that space with us. A lot more brainstorming, a lot more creativity trying to be poured into that front end, and we want the whole team to actually get involved because it can't just come from a few people as well. And in terms of breaking a mold, just like these chairs at the front, and can everyone just stand up for a second? Like, just stand up, come on. And just really fuck with the rows, and just sort of sit a bit differently because it's just crap. And I'll just get these chairs out of the way. Just a bit more of a huddle,
That's great, thank you. Did anyone else have any questions?
So you both spoke about whether you charge per hours or whether you charge on perceived value. And even you, Amy, you said you charge hours, but that's kind of hidden and you don't necessarily show the client that. How do you convey to the client when you have that figure that it's worth it? How do you say that's worth it without showing figures of time and work that goes into it?
I think if you get to the position where you have to try and justify what you're doing and try and argue your position, I don't think it's the right fit. So if they don't value what you bring to the table, they don't actually trust in the service that you're providing, then I don't really fuck with that. I just pretty much walk away and be like, all right, it's done. You don't see it, and there's no point in me arguing and going back and forth, and that's not a good experience of both parties involved. So, I try to, identify that at the very earliest stage before obviously talking too much about money.
I think what can help is if in that initial period where you're kind of having those discussions with the client, you're in the same room together, if you've really kind of gotten to the crux of what problem you're solving beyond sort of we're designing a brochure for you or we're designing a website for you, but sort of why are you doing that? Is it because revenue's down by 20% from last year to this year and you actually need to pick it back up? Or whether it is new entrants and entering into your market and it's now a very competitive market and you need to up your game. If you can get those questions answered and then really get to terms with how you're solving those problems for them on a fundamental business level beyond we're going to create you a really great brochure, they will intrinsically, in my experience, understand the value and it won't come to that.
I tend to think of those first few meetings that you have with a client like a date, so like either a really good Tinder date or a really bad Tinder date. So, and it's like it's you kind of have these alarm bell moments, I suppose, with certain clients where you figure out what your non-negotiables are and you should cling to those, but then there's those little indications that the clients aren't quite getting it. And those are opportunities as well. So they're opportunities for you to really start to talk about those things in depth and to start go through and educate them on, because they're not designers, so educate them on what they're going to do and the value they're going to bring. And then after that, then that's when you can make the call on if they're a good fit or not for you. But I think it's really investing in that time and really spending that time to allow them to understand the value and to also spend the time to know their business as well. So you can't just kind of go, I'm going to slap a logo on this and I'm going to make this brochure look pretty and expect things to happen. We all know that won't work. It's really understanding how they operate and what their actual business needs are. And if you spend that time doing it, I think, like Henry said, I don't think you'll come up against those problems too frequently. You will, but not as frequently. Yep.
I have two microphones. This one's on the lead. Here's one. I heard earlier. Hopefully it reaches. Any other questions?
I can project my voice.
I know you can.
What's a time that you have really kind of lost a lot of money on a project or a client, and it's kind of turned out to be quite a good experience and probably worth it in the end, even though monetarily it was quite a big loss? And alternatively, when has that situation happened and you come out of it feeling really like, I've just lost everything on this, I haven't even learned anything from it, it's been very frustrating. Do you have two of those stories from both sides?
Yes, I probably have a few of those stories, I think. There's one, I suppose the most recent one that springs to mind was, it was actually more bad timing for me. This was that big 9-month project, and at the same time I found out I was pregnant, and I was had a really difficult pregnancy, and so I was dealing with the physical toll as well as the creative and emotional toll of what was actually a really difficult client. And that was the one time in over, I think it was about 13 years of my career at that point, where I let go of some non-negotiables. I let the client dictate some areas that I wouldn't normally do, because I felt, because I was so exhausted and pregnant and feeling kind of miserable, that they're going to run away and then I'll have no work in that. But towards the end, I suppose I managed to reclaim part of my work back, if you like, and I'm actually really, really proud of the work. I finished the job, so I finished the work and I took it the whole way through, and it's really, really fabulous work, and I'm really, really proud of it. But what I learned was basically how to avoid a whole new layer of burnout, and it took a long time to come back from that as well. I actually ended up being so creatively broken and physically broken after that I took 9 months off. So after I had a kid, and then I ended up taking a job as an account manager and a project director, because it stripped away all of my confidence for a while. It's taken a long time to get that back, but I think that was really came down to bending, I suppose, the rules, the systems that I've always kind of clung to, and it really, really changed and redirected that work. But yeah, that was my experience.
I can't really think of a project where lost money and got a good outcome coming out of it.
I learned something valuable.
Learned something valuable. Yeah, I guess that was leading to my point. Like bad experiences are normally the best lessons. Particularly in my career, they're the biggest sort of shifts and turning points that I've had through, fuck ups and doing things wrong. So, I've had multiple cases where, design by committee is obviously an absolute nightmare. So, a group of Chinese investors trying to get, them on board of one single direction when they're all competing against each other and got conflicting views. And, the key lesson that I probably learned there was, take control of who is the decision makers. So, make sure you empower at least 2 or 3 people that are going to be visionaries for that particular project. They're going to lead the way on those sort of aspects. And, even recently it sort of crept up on another one, where there was a company, was multiple people on a side business that both had their full-time jobs elsewhere. So this was a bit of a side hustle, and they weren't really fully invested in that sort of project. So same thing, 6 people conflicting sort of values and conflicting, what they actually wanted to get out of that project, and they couldn't agree on anything. And so, obviously going through that experience before, I could see that was happening. Raised the flag with them and told them we need to obviously have a break, and I wouldn't be invoicing anymore, and we need to review this process because clearly it's not working. But I guess that takes at least one experience to then understand that could potentially happen.
I'm trying to think. Joel mentioned before about the idea of get as much upfront as possible. I remember one example when we were just starting out as a sort of a couple of guys just trying to start up a studio. This builder came to us saying they were going to do a fashion show, and that's already alarm bells. Why would a builder do a fashion show? And he said he had signed up Jennifer Hawkins, he'd signed up Ruby Rose, Burswood Dome when Burswood Dome was still around. And he said, look, I I can't pay you much right now, but once we get the ticket sales really rolling, we'll be able to pay you the remaining amount. So we ticked along and we did all the work, and then ticket sales went on, and then essentially his ticket prices were far too high, if I recall, and he couldn't even sell one row of the Burswood Dome, and then he went missing, just uncontactable for a really long time. And we emailed him, we sent him legal letters, and eventually we got some of the money back, but not all of the money. And it was just for two lessons. I think trust your gut. When it feels off from the beginning, it probably is off. And as Joel mentioned earlier, if they're not willing to put some dough on the line at the beginning, then there's probably something wrong to begin with.
So I think I guess my train of thought off that question was addiction to loss leader, which in your head you sell it to yourself. Oh, I'll do this one, it'll be good on the portfolio, you know, and it's all right, I'll do this one, and the next time I'll learn all the lessons of that first one, and I'll make sure the second one's, you know, better. And sometimes that just doesn't happen. And I think along the way you learn that not all clients, not all sectors are built equally. Some sectors are just poor and some sectors are rich, and you sort of, I guess a smart business diversifies that. So I don't even know if that answers the question, but that's where my mind went. I think, you know, diversifying that risk is really important. Like, we have a heap of hospitality, food and drink clients, and that's not a wealthy sector by any stretch of the imagination. It's a cool sector, and we love that we're passionate about it. It's a perpetual loss leader, but at the same time, you know, we go around the office and you ask about passions, and it's pretty clear what everyone around the office wants to do. So we make sure that there's a good balance in there. Sorry, Rachel, I don't know if that's it.
You keep that microphone. That's the panel. Anyone else? Man back there.
I'll probably yeah, but I've got a question more about integrity of pricing models. One of the things we run in the studio, been around a little while. We typically do rebrands, so our value-based pricing model is sort of core to our structure. We've got that down pat, but over the years we've added more complementary services to the business, and I think a lot more of those, the clients are sort of looking for a subscription model or a retainer model, which is sort of old agency language. I guess we kind of look at, you know, what are they going to spend over 12 months? We divide it by 12, you know, and then that's what we work out our, you know, monthly is going to be. But often, I guess the integrity question comes down to, a lot of times the clients don't spend all of that money. And we sort of go back to the client, and because again, you guys talked about playing a long game, and say you're not spending all your money. Some clients are like, okay, thank you for telling us that, can you bank it? And it becomes a bit of an overhead actually to run that and sort of say, well, this client over here is spending more, and this client's not spending enough. It sounds like a bad problem to have, but I'm just wondering, what do you guys, I mean, obviously you're running an agency, so you'd have similar sort of issues. Henry, being client side, would be really interesting, because we get a few clients where we go, we haven't spent money, and after 2 or 3 months they go, oh look, it's easier for you to keep invoicing this because otherwise I'm going to lose my marketing budget. It's really nice to have, but yeah, how do you guys deal with that on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, so I think at a base level, if they're asking you to bank money, you know, there's something wrong. You need to be proactive all the time, and you need to be pushing harder and faster than the next competitor that's going to knock on their door. So you have to be really serious about that. It might seem like, you know, it's an easy just to bank some cash. Oh, they didn't really want anything this month. We'll just, you know, stash that in the bank. That you owe them. You know, you owe them now, and that overhead is real, and it's a transaction nonetheless.
Yeah.
So you have to be showing value all the time, and you have to be pushing all the time. And if you can't come up with new ideas or new ways to add value to that client's business, then the relationship's probably over.
Pretty much agree with everything Joel said there in terms of we've changed consultants a few times in a few different sectors, whether that be sort of digital marketing or whether we change a sort of recruitment consultant or something like that. But it's all about, they always, we expect them to always be delivering value. For a lot of the consultants we work with, if there is a retainer-based or subscription-based model, we'll have a monthly or a bi-monthly small think tank of some sort, which is where we generate the initiatives for the coming months. So we never tend to find that we run dry of things as long as we are doing something like that, because I guess our mandate to them is we don't want you to just be an executor. We don't want you to just be sort of telling you we want this and then you go and do that. We want you to come back to us and sort of say, hey, actually, coming from an outside perspective, looking into your business, have you thought about X, Y, Z? And then we'll sort of say, oh, actually, we haven't. Maybe we should dedicate the next couple of months and use up that subscription or that retainer-based pricing to strategically think about those things.
I mean, just to add to that, we're not just banking, we go back to the client multiple times. These are big, like, oil and gas, mining, resources companies and marketing managers that don't really aren't as proactive as you. And it's more a conscience problem to have. You don't want to sack a client by saying you're not spending the money when you've gone back month after month after month reporting to them, what about if we try this, what if we try that, and they just literally come back going, look, can I just...
Okay,
So it's that way. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't coming off as
No.
So it's a genuine problem because we price things on a project by project.
It's usually because someone's hiding in the ranks of the company structure.
Exactly.
Right.
But sooner or later, the light will be shone on us by whoever replaces them.
Yes.
And then we go, well, we wrote email after email.
So I try and go above.
I'm just really interested. And we've done that too. So I'm just really interested in, because it's not saying we want to be pricing on a retainer. It doesn't work for our model.
No.
And I was just really curious to see how do you guys deal with those sort of things. And I think that we have let go clients because of that, because it banked after a quarter. We just went, this isn't working, so we're going to stop billing you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was just curious more than anything else. How do you deal with that when, because it's the opposite of what we talked about tonight, about how do you price, but there are actually problems when you're being fed too much money by companies that have decent budgets.
I'll share a case study. We had a client, we had 2 years of delivering really good value to this client, got their whole house in order, rebrand, full digital strategy rollout, and they had changed the face of their business. Every I guess branded application and touch point in their business we had essentially redesigned for them. They're in a mining engineering fabrication business, so it's largely B2B, and we did everything from awareness based outdoor FIFO billboards and right down to very targeted LinkedIn and even in workshop at the tier 1 mining houses activations to try and get this brand in front of people. At the start of this year, they sort of said to us, we need to hire an internal marketing person because we've got no one to actually interface with you at the moment. We can't deal with the amount of communication that you're sending our way, so we need to hire someone to fill. And we're like, right, so we will pay your retainer just while we figure that out. 6 months later, they hadn't figured it out, or they just figured it out actually. Yep. And then the CEO goes, what's this fee? And what's the performance, what's the KPI? And as a result, your head's on the chopping block and you're like, you have to dig up, you have to prove yourself back again. And really it's and so that whole situation of you were being ethical, you were trying to be proactive, and then all of a sudden you're in a bad situation because of whatever's going on their end has led you down that path. So I would I guess try to chop the knees as quickly as you can is the advice.
Everyone talks about moving to a subscription model. You look at, like, if you buy a product online, if you want to subscribe to Xero,
Yeah.
if you don't use the accounting package, that's up to you.
Yeah.
And so, but why is design, why is what we do, why is a service-based business any different? Why are we judged differently? Because shouldn't it be back to the responsibility of the person commissioning the services?
Mainly because the budget line item is a 12 or a 6 month.
Yeah. So it's a difficult question to answer, I guess.
Right in front.
Okay, so this is kind of a hefty question, just about losses. Basically, how often do you experience losses in any kind of way, and is it something that you kind of expect and then, you know, make plan to expect it and, you know, compensate for those losses?
I wouldn't really say losses, because I'm not really in the business to lose money. But
Or just on time, or like, you know,
yeah, I guess
anyway.
you know, meeting with clients like regularly and trying to, you know, figure out projects and what, you know, is the appropriate amount to charge around, you know, like any sort of project. You know, there's always going to be people that are going to say no and are going to waste your time and kick tires. So I think like that's where I see the biggest loss potentially. The biggest time wasted is trying to qualify people that they are the right fit and that they are, you know, actually value your service and that you're going to do something that is worthwhile for them. And so I guess that's just over time, you just sort of learn how to, you know, qualify that quicker and better and learn those questions that really get to the tough questions or the hard points that they're really dealing with to identify that as early as possible so that it doesn't become a loss at a later stage.
Probably not happening as frequently as they used to when I first started out, but I think you just get better at learning from your mistakes and that as well, and sticking hard and fast to your rules and your processes and being totally reflective in how you operate. And I think the key is the relationships that you build with your client. If you build those really, really fantastic relationships, then if there is a bit of a push and it is starting to look like a loss, you can communicate that really easily. Clients are actually really lovely human beings. So, and a lot of the time, like little simple things like you've gone under on a job, you don't charge them as much, and that'll reward you so much more in future jobs. Little things go a long way, but then when you do have a big loss, a lot of the time the clients, if you've built that relationship, they'll meet you halfway, but they tend to not. They happen a lot when you first start, but then you learn quickly. You learn really, really quickly. I think being reflective, and Joel, I think you might attest to this, the first 2 or 3 years that you were out there, I think you made the majority of your mistakes in those first 2, and then by year 3 you're kind of like, I'm not going to make these mistakes anymore, and you get really firm and you just figure out, but they still happen and they just surprise you is when they happen. They really surprise you. So.
I guess what we're kind of talking about is the idea of scope creep or something like that, where if you're not very clear, I guess, up front about what the scope of that work is, then, and you're not very clear, I guess, in the process of that project of identifying when that scope of works is actually changing, then it can be easy to, I guess, lose on that job in terms of it takes one more time than you expected. I know I'm a huge culprit as a client of scope creep in terms of because of just the nature of our business, we're constantly rethinking the way we do something. So halfway through a project which originally was budgeted for, let's say, $30,000, $40,000, suddenly the consultant usually is very upfront. They'll say to you immediately, look, what we're doing is completely rethinking what we had originally thought was the solution, and that's an entirely different project altogether. And I think that transparency on both ends, for us to know that we're doing that and for them to obviously still make money off the job, it's a win-win for both parties, because we don't want them to feel like they're having to take it on the chin and then the next project they're all bitter about the previous project where we tried to undercut them and change the scope. So if we want to have a long-term relationship with that person, then we're always happy to have that conversation around a change in scope.
On on our agency management software system, which is called Black Box, by the way, because it records everything. We basically have an hourly rate in dynamic form, so we can see how profitable we are on a job. So when we win and we lose, it's very clear, and whether we win or lose, we debrief on each project. So every key team member gets in a room and has to explain what happened, why we won, why we lost, and that goes into the record as well. So the idea that, and really what you're talking about in terms of, I find that the most challenging part is I'll go in and lay the strategic framework and the roadmap, and then I'll pass it to the team, and then the client will change the direction and the team's trying to follow the original roadmap. At that point you have to, the team has to recognise that the game plan has changed, and that's where we're trying to bring, I guess, the decision making, rather than the decision making happening at the top level, bring it down to where the information's being actually happening with the team, and allow them and empower them to actually make decisions, or put the flags up and say, look, this client, this project, whatever it is, needs to be rethought, rescoped, redone.
We have time for one more question.
My question is more towards getting paid. So you've spoken with the client, they're happy with the overall design, you're up to the stage of handing over the print-ready files. What's the professional way of saying, pay me, pretty much? What do I do? Do I hand over the files? Should they pay me before I hand over the files? Pardon?
Sorry.
Exactly, that type of stuff.
So take the money up front. When you've got the experience and they trust in you enough, they will do that. Not everyone's personality is built out for invoicing. I mean that. I'm not a good invoicer. As much as these days I've learned that it's not really a thing. It's they expect it. But some people love it. So my advice is partner with someone that loves it, and then you can focus on what you do, and they can focus on that.
My advice is kind of similar. I had that slide up before where we were saying it's an accountant, an engineer, and a designer. If you have complementary skill set, so we're not really answering your question if you're a freelancer, but if you have people around you that are the ones that are happy to sort of chase up the money and make the terms clear, then that's helpful. But I guess if you have to do it yourself, it's just the nature of being a one-man band, whether you're a freelancer in design or whether you're a freelancer or in whatever field, you have to wear a lot of hats. And I think when you're just starting out and maybe you just want to be a freelancer, you're always going to have to wear a lot of hats, and one of those hats will be the invoicing hat. And as much as you want to just wear the design hat 100% of the time, you might actually wear the invoicing hat 10% of the time, having to follow up clients. Some clients are just naturally bad payers, and you're going to have to have that tough conversation with them, maybe once, maybe twice, maybe 3 times, about that invoice that's still outstanding from 2 months ago. That's just the nature of being a freelancer, I guess. Maybe Tom can kind of speak to that.
Yeah, definitely. I think Joel's point about getting payment up front is probably the biggest sort of shifts that you have mentally about going into any sort of project. So an easy way to transition to that is just charge 50% up front. So before the project even starts, just get that down payment to get the ball rolling. And so much of us have talked about qualifying, going through that sort of process with the client, and really dictating that payment term as part of that process really makes it clear and understandable. I think so much of Western society is talking about money is a bad thing, and it's rude to talk about that at the dinner table or whatever it is, and it's really just not. As soon as you talk to people about it open and transparently, you realise that, you know, they understand and they can see where you're coming from, and, you know, they might fuck up that time, but, you know, you can sort of keep their ass and get them into gear for future stuff.
Yeah, the 50% upfront is a non-negotiable, absolutely, and I suppose you need to establish those payment boundaries right at the beginning before you even start designing, and that as well. You need to make sure that your client is clear on that, and maybe get them to sign an agreement as well. So I know AGDA have got, I think, some great T&Cs that are on there that you could probably use as well, which would be brilliant in kind of realigning that.
In my first 2 years.
Yeah, and then the other thing is then don't give them the print files until they pay you, I suppose. Just if, look, it could be kind of tricky and you might lose them, but I don't know, if you're really, really early in your career, I think you can afford to make 1 or 2 mistakes, and if it's not, you know, someone that you're going to get a lot of work out of, I think you can burn a couple of bridges if you have to.
Well, I mean, to add to that, I mean, it's an ever-evolving process. Even our agency changes our payment terms. We change, you know, the way that we structure, the way that a project runs. Just recently, with our web jobs, we used to scope all of it, and we just figured out that in the prototyping stage, we are actually site mapping, wireframing, and copywriting out a user experience. You just don't know what the development's going to be. So now we will provide a prototyping piece and even give an indicative range on that sometimes, and then the development piece comes once you finish that. And you give them ranges, as long as they're comfortable with that and they trust you, then they go with it.
I think that milestone-based pricing is actually a really smart way of going about it, because things change so much from the beginning to the end, and if you price something completely from beginning to end, often you're going to shoot yourself in the foot halfway through, and you're going to have a tough conversation where you say, actually, well, those deliverables I said you needed, you don't actually need those, you need these ones instead, and they cost X thousands of dollars more.
I don't think it's a career stage thing either. I think it's actually just the way the world's going, right? So it's not about what stage you're at. And I just think, honestly, the world's moving too quickly to actually just define 6-month game plan sometimes. That's the state where we're at now. So just have the ability to sort of flex and change those goalposts.
And it's still the same as well with strategy and brand as well. I'm with the same. My experience, particularly in the last few years, has been that we just don't quote, you know, for beyond strategy. That is just the very first milestone, and then you kind of look at, you know, what is your branding and how are you going to apply it, and start breaking it into the steps right through the web and digital marketing, and that in my experience as well is that you just don't know. And then, I mean, there was a project that I've just been on that, you know, the job started before I came in, and it had been going for, I think, by the time I'd left this job, about 2 years, and their whole business plan has just completely reshaped, and now we're at the launch stage, and you have these moments where you kind of go, right, we need to go back to the strategy and re-look at that, and then all of a sudden all of these milestones, they start going in this big cycle around and around and around and around and again as well. So, and you just won't be able to predict that until you go on that journey, and the key is making sure that the clients go on that journey with you as well. So, because or else they're going to go, hang on, why is our strategy not working? But if they understand and they've been on that journey, then they'll kind of turn around and go, oh no, we get it, and we're going to do this, and this is how we're going to look. And then all of a sudden you're co-designing with them as well, which is really rewarding when they're actually
And you'll succeed or fail together, right?
Yeah.
And that's really all that matters.
Yeah.
As long as you're doing it together.
It's also a psychology thing, I think, as well, because $20,000 up front versus you price the whole project and it's $100,000, it looks a lot more daunting up front than sort of saying, let's just get this piece done first,
Yep.
and it's this amount of money, and then we'll work out the rest afterwards, and whether you have the budget to do it right now after that stage gate, or whether you wait 6 months for whatever to happen, then do the next phase. I think psychologically it works a little bit better that way as well.
That's so true. I mean, the little hiatus that I had from design, where I ended up working as a project director for a while, I actually just departed this job and had the client saying that, you know, we came in the door looking at spending X amount on branding and website, and now that we're coming up to the launch, we've spent 4 times that, and if you had have told us that right at the beginning, there is no way you know this company you're working for would have been hired. But in the same breath, you turn around and said, but we have absolutely no regrets, because what you've done is taken us through this whole milestone, all these deliveries, and they get it. They totally get it. They still feel like their back pocket is burning a little bit, but they get it as well. So slightly mixed.
Because well, and it's a mindset that you go into.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not costing you money. I'm going to make you money,
Yes.
right? Like, and if you go in with that mindset of, no, I'm going to figure out your business. I'm going to actually solve a problem that exists here, because they don't want a website. They don't want a brochure. They don't want this, that, and the other. That's not what they came for, right? Like, they think that's what they came for. But there is usually a business problem, or there's usually some sort of problem there that you actually have to get to the root of.
Or an internal cultural problem,
Exactly.
which is coming up a lot more than you think as well, is that so many rebrands these days are coming across as about solving.
People change.
Totally, about realigning internally before, you know, projecting that externally as well, which is a fun problem to play with.
Yeah, firstly, it's great to know that we got this far in the game, and only to now realise we don't need microphones at all.
It was the harder one, though.
If everyone can please thank me. Thank you. Join me in thanking our panelists for their insight and being so candid tonight. That'd be great. So that's the end of our Money Talks event. I can't believe I fucked my end bit up that much. So yeah, feel free to stick around. If we could please vacate the area. The top area, feel free to avail yourself. Like, contrary to like what it may sound like, I don't get a kickback every time I buy a drink, but yeah, if you feel inclined, stick around, talk to your fellow people. Yeah. Thank you very much.